Hey, sorry about that, everybody. That was sort of a crazy thing. I've never had that happen before. Hopefully everybody can hear me just fine. Welcome, everybody. The YouTube stream that I originally had started kind of kicked out and died or something. I don't understand. So let me know if you guys can hear me. Hopefully you can. What we got in here today? We got, all right, loud and clear. Thank you, London. So yeah, because you know it. Oh, I'm muted. Oh no. Am I muted? It doesn't seem like I'm muted. Oh, okay. Michael's just messing with me. Okay, well, thanks. Listen, I just went through some traumatic, last second realization. See, part of the problem was I forgot to set up my live stream thumbnail, and I didn't want, to not have anything on YouTube. So I just I set it up from my phone today while I was getting coffee for a lunch break, and and I've never done that before, and apparently that was screwy or something like that. So anyways, that's that. So, hey, how is everybody? Hopefully everyone is doing well. We got quite a few people in here today already. We've got Abuelo, we got Anthony, Atomic Hobo, Mr. Benassaro himself, Ishara Comics, Joey, K Swistack, KC's in here, London Matthews, Michael G, Michael Sanders, the Adventurer himself, Stephen Palmer, still spouting that lovely, nice to last call badge. We got Swing Ripper, Total Entropy, and Walker. Welcome, everybody. Glad to see everybody. Hello. Joshua Foley, Rivo's here. Very good. So, this is gonna be well, not our last Tuesday live stream, but certainly our last one that is going to be weekly. Oh, Damien's here too. Welcome. Hey, Damien. Torn is here. But after starting next week, we will have our session 0 for Quest for the Frozen Flame. And that means that these weekly get-togethers on Tuesdays are going to become at least every other week for the time being, until we hopefully maybe get some more games running or something else going on. Marcos, hey. Josh, that's cool. Picked up the Book of Dead today. We are pending a review, but we really liked it. Without, I mean, we're allowed to say what we want, but I'd want you to watch the video. But no, I thought the book was great, and I've always had a soft spot for undead. As you know, undead giants and dragons are like my favorite monster types in the game, and I really think I like the direction the book is going, and I hope that we see more books from Paizo that sort of follow that format. And I'll be honest with you, we have the Knights of Last Wall book 2 in PDF, but I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. But I do want to delve into that and see if it's more of the same. Fingers crossed that it is. So yeah, how is everybody? Yeah, end of an era. Somebody said. Oh, Ben did. Yes. Well, this Tuesdays, we didn't even have a live stream until December, but when the Rise of the Runelords AP came to an end, I thought I was having so much fun, and I'd already kind of cleared my Tuesdays. I just figured we'd keep it going. So, it's been interesting. It's been fun getting to do these. I'd like to do these more often on top of it, but I mean, I understand that everybody else is very busy too, but I like being able to have sort of this freewheeling opportunity to just kind of chat with everybody. I mean, we do this all day on the Discord anyways, but it's nice being able to get face to face. But, one thing I'm definitely interested in doing at some point is tapping into the Patreon and, doing some round tables with the patrons and getting some folks on here with sort of some interesting things to discuss, and maybe some debate topics, things that we can talk about. So yeah, anyways, so since this is live stream number 10 of sort of the Derek Random Rambling GM series, as of course and always, you are free and welcome to ask any questions. Please try to put question before you do anything, so that we know that I can find it easily. And if you are interested in supporting the channel, feel free to tip. You can use the super chat feature, or you can head to our Stream Elements webpage. There's a link in the description below, and those tips will actually get text to speech and will get read out to the stream. A little bit of a benefit and bonus because we get a higher percentage. YouTube doesn't take a big bite out of the Stream Elements tips like it does super chat. And of course, if you're really interested in showing off and you want to become an adventurer of the Knights of Last Call, well, then you can join our channel below and join the Knights of Last Call membership. This is separate from our Patreon, which I would really encourage you to join. But this was simply because some of our patrons said, I want custom emotes for YouTube. And so here we are. We have custom emotes for our YouTube, thanks to our wonderful band of of patrons who demanded these. Roll for Combat asks, am I a member? Can I be a knight? Roll for Combat, can you be a knight? Well, to be a member, you officially become an adventurer, because unfortunately knight was already taken in our Patreon. So we wanted to come up with a different name for it, but so the term is adventurer, because you're being very adventurous. I mean, again, I cannot stress this enough. We would 100% rather you have join the Patreon. The only reason we created the YouTube memberships option is because we had some members of our Patreon community who wanted us to create it. I was never going to create it, and they insisted that I do that, just so that they could get the silly little badge next to their name, and of course the custom emotes that are only available to a YouTube member. So if you are really looking, to have your own, Jason B emote, then you too can also join. Don't forget, of course, the math is tight emote as well. And of course, the real winner is, of course, the mammoth. I mean, that was really the main reason that we did it, to support our upcoming AP. But yeah. Anyways. Oh, so yeah. Any questions or anything like that? Let me know, and we can talk about it. But one of the things I want to talk about today, I've been watching a lot of, been having a lot of conversations and thoughts lately about RPGs, and I want to actually, we're going to start off with something really, really kind of crazy here, which is last night or Sunday night, I was having some drinks, and I got into a long conversation with Mr. Aaron Smith of our channel, and I was trying to figure out why I didn't like 5th edition. And let me back this up a little bit further. Taking 20 recently did a video where his thumbnail was something like, had a white flag, and it said something like, Paizo is waving a white flag with the production of Abomination Vaults. And on the surface, this is similar to my take, but it's actually not. His take was far more, ironically enough, by the way, no one accused him of being a clickbait fool, and he got thousands and thousands more views than I ever would. But long story short, he basically said, hey, look, I see this as a way for Paizo to make money, and to that end. Now, my concern was that Paizo would make a lot of money and be like, hey, we should focus more on this 5e business model. His point, taking 20 point, was that, Paizo was basically saying, yeah, this Pathfinder 2e thing didn't really work out for us. And, sure, you might be number 2, but you are way, way below number 1. So, you can't beat them, join them. There's no shame in that. Paizo used to be a publishing house for Dungeons & Dragons, and they can go back to that, and there's no shame in that. I don't know about all that. But he did say something, which I thought was really, really interesting. And what he said was, he was kind of walking through the history of D&D, and he basically said, and then along comes 5th edition, which is like, I think he called it the love child of 3rd edition, 2nd edition, and basic. And I never really heard that described that way. I mean, it certainly makes sense in a certain component. And it really made me stop in my tracks, and I thought, that is kind of true in a certain sense or a certain way. I don't know about the 2nd edition part so much. I suppose, 5th edition does feel a bit more constrained than 3rd edition. But, I will certainly agree that it is it is a game that harkens back to the Dungeons & Dragons of the 80s and 90s, with certain elements of 3rd edition sort of thrown in. And I remember, so I heard that and I thought, well, I loved 3rd edition D&D. And I love the purity, the simplicity, the ease of use of basic D&D. Now, I have, look, I was a child when basic D&D was out, and I really, cut my teeth on 2nd edition D&D. And I mean, my first thing was the black box set, which was basic. Beck Me Basic, basically. I think they call it 5th edition, 6th edition basic or something. But I grew up, in that sort of environment. But I really cut my teeth on 2nd edition, 3rd edition, and I love the idea of basic. But I'll be honest with you, after playing 3rd edition and playing some of these other editions of the game, it's fun. I'll do it at conventions and I'll do these short stories. But it is tough for me to ever imagine myself playing a complete, full length, many, many months or even year, campaign in basic. And the reason is, I love getting into the game. I love playing with it. I love the simplicity of it, but I like there to be a little bit of meat on the bones as it speaks to the character. I mean, I could probably honestly debate both sides of the equation about whether or not I think skills are a good thing to have in D&D or not. But, when I play basic, there's not a lot to the character sheet except for what you put in there, right? Like, meaning what you decide, what you build in the campaign, and that's great, and that's all that. But I do like for some, for the game to have some more mechanical elements. I like mechanical elements. And that's why, one of the reasons why I was always a huge fan of 3rd edition. And when I first, I don't remember now, so I was talking to Aaron and I said, I heard that. I said, I loved 3rd edition. I love basic. I love the simplicity of basic. Why don't I like 5th edition? Because on the surface, it has the DNA of a series of games that I really, really, really enjoy. And although Cody from Taking 20 didn't say this, there are even elements hidden under the surface that were present from 4th edition, which I loved, that they carried into 5th edition secretly so that nobody would notice it, right? Very secretly so that no one would notice it. You have powers and abilities that function on a long rest timer. These are essentially daily powers from 4th edition. You have some classes that have abilities and powers that function on a short rest. Now, a short rest in 4th edition was only 5 minutes long, and it was assumed that you would, kind of like Pathfinder 2nd edition, it was assumed that after every major encounter or fight, that the characters would have 5 minutes in which they could recover. And then you would recover what were called your encounter powers, and in 5th edition, they would call them short rest powers. And similarly, in 4th edition, after 5 minutes of a short rest, you could spend your healing surges to regain hit points. And now in 5th edition, they are called hit dice. And again, you do that after of several minutes.
Joshua F. tipped $3.89.
Thank you, Joshua F., for the first tip of the evening. I very, very much appreciate it. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome to the channel. Welcome to the show. Hope you have a fun time. Let me know what's up. So, again, now, some people hated healing surges. I actually kind of loved them. In fact, in 4th edition, if you were out of healing surges, you could not be healed. Cleric healing powers or spells in 4th edition didn't really heal you so much as they allowed you to spend your healing surges that were inherent to your character, and they allowed you to spend them in the middle of something like a combat, and you didn't have to just have 5 minutes out of combat, or they would allow you to spend them with like an extra bonus to get a little bit more punch out of them. But fundamentally, hit dice are very similar to that. And so again, and now I understand that the game has feats; they're technically optional. But on paper, and this is fairly the case. So I said, why don't I like 5th edition? And Aaron said, because of Critical Role. He said, because it's become so popular, and you are inherently, contrarian, and you just don't want to like something because other people like it. And hey, thanks for the super chat, Denny the Many. That's a great name. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate it. And Bob appreciates it. Thank you, Denny. Thank you very much. So I was like, okay, but here's the deal. I didn't like when 5th edition first came out. I remember we bought the books. This was like 2015 or whatever. Critical Role was nothing yet, and the game was just D&D, which had been struggling in the wake of 4th edition. And it came out, so it didn't have any of the elements that Aaron was describing to it. And we sat down and we played it. And I remember coming away from the experience thinking, I didn't like this. I didn't enjoy it. And I really cannot remember why I didn't enjoy it. And so one of the things that really struck me recently is we told a story. Every month we have a Patreon Q&A. It's exclusive to members of our Patreon who are Knight tier and higher. And it's just like this, except it's much more personal. It's on Zoom. Our higher tier people can, join the video chat and talk with us. And I told the story, one of our favorite stories of all time from 3rd edition D&D, And this was a story of a group of adventurers who got in way over their head against a big group of minotaurs, and they fought them and killed them. And one of the characters that fought and died in that fight was named Krom the Barbarian, with a K, not a C. And he was a half-orc barbarian. And in our minds, and during the time I remember playing this character, I didn't play him, Aaron did, up to level 5 before he met his untimely demise fighting and those minotaurs. The party won the day, but Krom paid the ultimate price and he lost his life. Well, I happened to find this character sheet. And this was 3rd edition, not Pathfinder 1. So you got a feat at 1st level, at 3rd level, at 6th level, at 9th level, right? So not every 3 levels, but essentially plus 3 levels. And when I looked at this character sheet, I remember in my mind, this character was incredible and had this amazing background and this incredible stories that had gone through. And I remember recently playing in a 5th edition campaign. I was DMing it for some friends of the show, and we were playing once a month. And I said, I'll play. They really wanted to play D&D, and I said, okay, we'll play D&D. And one of the players, Matt Holloway, made a barbarian, and I remember he was playing this barbarian. And I thought, oh, this thing seems so limited. It was 5th edition. How many choices are you really making? And I think he's got his barbarian to about level 3 or level 4. And I remember thinking, this character just didn't seem interesting to me. And then I found the character sheet the other day for this Krom, for this half-orc barbarian from 2003, who just lives incredibly large in my mind and in the minds of my friends. And it's been so long since I even cracked a 3rd edition book. And I looked at it and I opened it up. And this character from a barbarian class had gained 1 ability, Rage, level 1. He had made no choices for his class. Every barbarian in 3rd edition D&D was exactly the same as every other barbarian in 3rd edition D&D. There were no subclasses or anything like that. And he got a feat at level 1, and he got a feat at level 3. And he had taken power attack and cleave, like so many characters had, as many other barbarians had. And so it's interesting because on paper, looking at that character sheet, a 5th edition barbarian was a much more complex character. A 5th edition barbarian had made several more choices than this character had either. And yet this character seemed larger than life to me. This character seemed extremely complex and very robust and full of interesting play patterns and decisions and choices. And yet, when I think about it from a perspective now, I go, I don't enjoy the 5th edition playing. And I was really left scratching my head going, why is that? And so after I brought this up to our esteemed Mr. Smith, he pointed out that it's because it came out and it wasn't 4th edition. I had liked 4th edition, and this maybe felt like a step backwards. And that's probably true. I probably did view it as a retreat. It's sort of a rebuking of the fact that I had enjoyed the 4th edition of D&D. But it really stuck with me because I played 3rd edition D&D for a very long time. 8-9 years. A lot. I mean, this is like when I was playing, this was undergrad and grad school and right after and doing all the crazy things like, I lived in an apartment with several of my players. We all lived in the same apartment building. We would play all the time. So I played a lot of 3rd edition D&D. And when I think back to those characters and I think back to the way that they were built, so many of them were extremely simplistic. By 5th edition standards, fairly roughly equivalent and equal. And we had an incredible time. And it wasn't because of the way someone had built their character. It was just because we had fun playing that character. Now, what's the point of all this? Well, it doesn't mean anything. In terms of like, do I suddenly want to go run and play a 5th edition game? No, I don't. But it does make me wonder or think about, how we as a community, as gamers, sort of develop and build these biases and these internal biases. And, I'm always trying to challenge my own, perceptions. And I don't know. One of the things that I think I really need to take a long, hard look at is how I am judging a game. And I think one of the reasons I bring this up is because when I play a game like Pathfinder 2nd Edition, the rules that are present, they help. But they also get in the way a lot. And, when I play a game like Basic or something like that, I know that there basically aren't any rules. And so I have absolutely no problem changing anything or everything or doing whatever I want because I know it's not going to screw it up. I'm talking about like, you go and train with the master of, Bao Xiao Wu. And what do I do? You get a permanent +3 untyped bonus to your attack roll. I mean, is that powerful in a game like 3rd edition or Basic? Sure, of course it is. I mean, that's very powerful. It's very useful. But it doesn't like destroy the game. I mean, like a Mind Flayer in 3rd edition is like a CR7 or CR8 monster, and its AC is like 17. So like a fighter at that level has like a +14 or 15 or something or 16 to hit. So like they're already hitting it like on a 1 or a 2. So giving them +3 more bonus doesn't really matter. And I've found that I don't do that as much in Pathfinder 2. Because the reason I'm playing Pathfinder 2 is because it has this very, very tightly scripted, very, very tightly defined game system. And I mean, I'm a very experienced GM, but I don't want to. Why would I mess with that? I guess because messing with it implies that I want to screw it up. But that whole reason I'm playing Pathfinder 2 is because I wanted something, quote unquote, that worked. And I feel like there's a strange sort of dissonance there where part of what makes role-playing games fun for me is messing with them. And
Bennett tipped $25.
Hey.
Time for pups in the wine trees. Have a good night, y'all.
Hey, enjoy dogs. I can't wait to hear how it goes, Ben. Love you for the tip. Thanks, buddy. And thanks for the conversation earlier. And we'll talk to you soon, Ben. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Enjoy your game. Yeah, I'm sorry if I've missed the chat. I was kind of really trying to go deep here, so I'm sorry if I missed anything. But, inherently, I kind of, I kind of agree with Tony, which is that 5e is definitely a middle ground. I mean, I will contend. I will agree with that. But it's a strange thing because if you're not familiar, it's over there. I was gonna pull down Dune, but I am a big fan of the science fiction novel series Dune, and one of the ideas of Dune is the limitation of prescience, that knowing the future is to be trapped by it. And I think that's something that we have to be careful of when we talk about role-playing games, that to have a role-playing game system with extremely tight rules can possibly be to be trapped by it. And to feel, and to be, and quite frankly, right? Like if I went in and I gave somebody in Pathfinder 2 a +3 to hit, that would have a really, really big impact on the game, right? Like a huge impact on the game. And so there's a certain element where you say, well, you could still do that. Of course, you could still totally do that. But you really would be kind of almost ignoring the thing that Pathfinder 2 was sort of designed and good for in the first place. It would be like, taking something like
Stephen tipped $15. Time to judge the wicked and protect another town on behalf of the King of Life. Later all.
Take care, Steven. Enjoy your game. I can't wait to hear about it. Thank you for the tip. Appreciate you. Have a fun gaming with Mr. Ben, and I hope it goes really, really well. By the way, they're playing Dogs in the Vineyard, if you're not familiar with it. This is a role-playing game by Vincent Baker, who created the Apocalypse World system. I think he might have created Dogs in the Vineyard first, but it is a game where you are a group of, it's like almost like a fictional version of the Utah territory. You're almost like you're like Mormons, kind of. But you're like you keep the peace. You represent sort of like the law enforcement of the land, and you go from town to town and you root out the wicked and try to expose the sins of those who would claim to serve the King of Life. It's a really interesting game. It has a really cool dice system, and it has kind of a poker element where you can raise the stakes. Before Derek comes out as a Pathfinder hater. No, I hate everything. That's one of the things that comes out. What I'm trying to say, definitely interested in a Mormon RPG. Well, Skid Mayor, check out Dogs in the Vineyard by it has some very strong Mormon overtones. Yeah, Dylan, I think that is true. I think you could still find the PDF online for free. It was all Creative Commons licensed release, but I don't think he himself publishes it directly because I think he felt like he was perhaps not being respectful. You know, there is a very strong vibe. I mean, it's not making fun of Mormonism or anything, but I think there was he felt ultimately like it wasn't his place to sort of make a setting based on that. I don't think he's Mormon, and so I don't think it's available for purchase for print. You can, I think, get it printed by a print-on-demand publisher like Lulu, or you could just get the PDF. So, plus 14 at 7th level. I want to play in your game. Well, a 7th level fighter would have a plus 7 base attack bonus. They might have weapon focus, which would give them plus 8. They could have greater weapon focus, which would make it plus 9. They might have an 18 or 20 strength, which would make it like plus 14 plus 15, right? 13, 14. And then they could have a plus 1 or maybe even a plus 2 weapon. So yeah, plus 14 plus 15, right? That is I'm talking about 3rd edition D&D, by the way. So yeah, I don't, I'm not trying to, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is, my bias that I have, might be somewhat founded on the fact that 5th edition represented a change or a reversal for me and a return to a simpler gaming experience. There are many things that I would love to do in Pathfinder 2nd edition, like getting rid of adding level to proficiency, which essentially take the game in the direction towards 5th edition in its own way. And so one of the things I want to talk to you about tonight are things that I would want to explore or change in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And think about why or how I would like to do them. Now, some of these things will be like, oh, well, that would break the fighter or something like that. But bear with me. I think, we're not actually solving these issues tonight. But I do think there's a couple of things that are really interesting to me, and I would want to look at them. Some of these are based off of conversations that I've been having on our Discord, which of course is a part of our Knights of the Last Call Patreon. If you're interested in checking that out, link in the description below or up in the little description thing. It's pretty cool. We've got a variety of community games. You just saw a bunch of people left. They're playing games on our server. We have a Northern Reaches game, which is our it's like our Super West Marches game because it's actually a persistent world. It's really, really awesome. Nathan Solano asks, can I ask if people have noticed any difficulties in role-playing in Pathfinder 2 due to the tactical complexity? Now, Nathan, that's a can of worms on this channel, because Derek, has a very, very scientific and specific definition of what it means to role-play. And I would say that if you're playing a game of D&D or Pathfinder, you are by definition role-playing, because you aren't playing a character, you're not playing an army, or you're not playing a car piece in a game of Monopoly, right? You are playing a single person. You are playing the role of a fighter in a group of adventurers. You are playing the role of being a heal bot, spamming heal for your cleric. You are being that's the role that you're playing. So you are always role-playing. Sometimes it makes me seem like a really, I don't even represent one side or the other. I actually sometimes feel like I am on an island unto myself about how I feel and think about role-playing games. But I will simply answer Nathan's question thusly. Yes. Using the standard definition of role-playing, I think that Pathfinder 2 is a very complex mechanical game. And when I am playing a game of checkers or tic-tac-toe, it's very easy for me to be having a drink and having a conversation. If I'm playing a game of chess or like 4D chess, the game itself is much more engrossing, but it makes it harder to, have casual conversations and focus on what's going on. Obviously, this is going to vary from person to person and from groups to group. But I see things here, and I'm just going to go off on this. The rules support role-playing good enough. Actually, in Pathfinder 2, the rules don't support role-playing at all. There's nothing in the game that requires you to play your character in any particular way or fashion. I'm not just being a pedant. There are game systems that require one to role play, and D&D and Pathfinder 2 are not two of those games. You thought plus 14 in 5th edition. Okay, yes, no. That being said, Christopher Jackson, I did play a 5th edition campaign, which we played according to our own rules. Let me bring them up. Let me see if I can bring this bad boy up for the people at home, just for the fun. What's it called? D&D Beyond, right? Isn't that what it's called? The website? All right. Oh, this is always good fun. Here we go. Is in collection. My characters. Wow, this has been a while. All right, here we go. I'm going to share this. This is if you've ever played D&D, prepare to be blown away here. All right. This is my D&D character from a campaign that was run by Mr. Smith in my game that I was a player in. This is Senwin, my level 20 bard. You will notice his dexterity of 30, his charisma of 30, his AC of 30, his 340 hit points. You will notice that he has expertise in 4 saving throws. Let me see what else he has. Wait. How do you get to your? Oh, here we go. Inventory. I actually have, I think, 6 or 7, attunement slots. Obviously, D&D Beyond does not allow this. Oh, no, this is very much 5th edition. Look, it's 5th edition right there. You can see it. It's very, very clearly 5th edition. And I'm just watching people's reactions. It's great. Let me think here. Do I have how much money I have? Let me see here. Right, because even though this says that this is what's attuned to my character, I think had 5 or 6 items, or 7, maybe 7 items attuned to this. I also have advantage against all spells. I have advantage against all magical effects. I'm trying to think what else I had here. My proficiency bonus is +7. Oh, Null Inquisitor. We're not even done yet. Hold on a sec. Wait a second. Let me see if I can find this. We're going deep now. So I will share this with the I'll share this link with the Patreon. I mean, you can come find it if you it's easy enough to find, I suppose, if you want to find it. But oh, I'm in the wrong thing. God damn it. Part of the problem with having a YouTube channel is like you end up having like 17 different YouTube channels. Because you have like test YouTube channels and all this other stuff. Okay, here we go. Found it. All right. I'm going to I'm going to change this over. All right, here we go. So this is a video recording of the final fight from our 5th edition campaign. In case it's hard to see, I assume, but we are fighting, that is as chaos, a specter or being of chaos. I think there's 2 Baylors. The Solar is a summon that someone has. This is, needless to say, quite the difference from what most people would experience in their games. It's like an hour and a half long fight. You can. I'm trying to find it. Okay, here we go. So these are all of the effects that various subclasses and magical items and artifacts get added onto our characters, which created an entirely separate system for tracking inspiration, because actually we could have inspiration, I think, up to 3 or 4 times per person. Total entropy, if it looks like a Final Fantasy boss, it's because it's very much what inspired that, was a Final Fantasy boss. So that is 100% correct. Swing Ripper, can you give me the assets for the map? Yes, if you're interested in checking out our final fight, there you go. If you just want to, if you're bored sometime and you really want to look at some stuff, that's the link. So the long story short of it is, I would never do something like that. Now, I was a player in that game, but I would never do something like that in Pathfinder 2, because what are you doing, right? That's not you. When you play Pathfinder 2, right, you have to put in a lot of effort and time and energy to learn how these games work and how the interactions work and how the mechanics work and how the traits work, and you're buying into that. So, like, to throw all that away seems sort of counter-purposed, right? I guess I just didn't feel that way with 5th edition, because it does feel like it's kind of whatever. And in that respect, it's like Basic, where, yeah, the rule system is horrible. Like, nothing is balanced, but who cares? If balance isn't what you care about, then why go through all the hoops that playing a game like Pathfinder 2 entails? And I think part of my understanding of how I look at fantasy games is, I think deep down, I think I like to be unbalanced, right? I want to have things that I'm not supposed to have. I want to be better than what I am supposed to be. You can't break something that's already broken. Pathfinder 2 isn't broken, so it makes it feel kind of bad wrong to start, breaking things just because you want to. And that means that you have to be very, very careful when you change things, which brings me back to my point, which is, what are some things that I would change about Pathfinder 2? So one of the first things I think I would change with Pathfinder 2 is, I think I would bring back taking 10. I don't like that you need a feat to do this, and I don't like how that feat is structured. Specifically, I am talking about assurance. In fact, for those of you who may not be aware, I'm sure you are, taking 10 simply means that you can, in 3rd edition, if you had something like a climb skill, athletics, if the DC of a wall was 18, and if your climb skill was +8, then in a non-worried, non-threatening sense, you could take 10. Nathan, there are no passives in PF2 except for passive perception. So, yes, in Pathfinder 1, you could take 20 or, to that nature. Now, that's a whole separate can of worms. But like part of the design feature of Pathfinder 2 was this idea that every roll should matter. And more importantly, there are real consequences normally when you critically fail a roll. This could be problematic because, if I'm going to climb a wall, even if I beat the DC on any roll but a 1, technically there is still a chance that I could roll a 1. I don't think it should just be done for downtime activities. I think it should be done for any sort of exploration-based activities where there isn't a constant threat or pressure. Number 2, I would still have assurance be in the game. I would let assurance work the same way as taking 10 works. So none of this, you only add your proficiency bonus. No. If my bonus in acrobatics is +14, then when I am not in a stressful combat situation, let me get a 24. I would still include assurance in the game. Maybe require that you need to be expert, maybe, or master even, before you're allowed to take assurance for that skill feat. But I would let you take 10 even in combat. Assurance meaning everybody's assured when you're not in the heat of it. But your character is so assured that they can take 10 even in a fight. And this way, if your character is like the athletic kind of, super guy or the super nimble acrobatics guy, and you're in combat, you don't have to worry about rolling a 3 or a 4 and flubbing it. You have assurance acrobatics. And so when you're fighting on the slippery ice structure and everybody else can, has to worry about falling, you just go, I've got this. On a 10, I get a 26 and I'm good. It's fine. It also really, really, really speeds up the play. And it means, because we have so much here to talk about, folks. This is it's not a critique of Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The game is complicated enough as it is, and they don't need it to be more complicated. But one of my complaints, I don't even want to call it a complaint. One of my issues is that trained expert master legendary don't mean enough, right? They don't mean enough. Like, the difference between trained and expert is +2. The difference between expert and master is +2. And there's a couple of skill feats that you gain access to, but quite frankly, a lot of those higher level skill feats are booty anyways. And then specifically in the world of thievery, there are certain traps and stuff that you need a certain level of proficiency in order to be able to work on. But that's not even a reward, right? That's just gatekeeping. That's not giving you something. It's just saying, you can do this now. Otherwise, you just cannot do this. For me personally, I want, I agree with Boothby. It doesn't even necessarily have to be gated. I mean, sticks are fine, but carrots are good too. I want there to be something mechanical in the game that distinguishes or separates someone who is trained versus expert. Let me give you an example. Now, I know the first thing you're going to say is, Derek, fighters are already OP and broken. I know. Ignore that. Fighters are a problem for another day. we're all familiar with the fact that at level 5, most classes get critical specialization, right? What if you tied, but what else do you get at level 5? If you're a martial character, you get expert in your weapon proficiency. What if critical specialization, what if being able to unlock the critical effect of your weapon, instead of just being tied to being level 5, was tied to becoming an expert? What if something else became tied to you becoming a master? They do this in other places in the game, and they don't do it in other places of the game. So I'll give you a great example. For a lot of the classes, when you become a master in a certain save, you also get some sort of other benefit, right? Like your successes count as critical success, right? That mechanic was actually what originally inspired my house rule change to hero points. So it's not like, because you're like, oh, cool, I gained resolve or whatever it's called, or lightning reflexes. My reflex save is now master, so I got +2. Well, yeah, no. You also gain this additional benefit where if you make a successful reflex save, it is treated as a critical success. Yeah, we would call this evasion in like the 3rd edition or 5th edition terms, but they have it for fort and they have it for will. Like, what if, as you go up the proficiency chain, if you become legendary in your will save or something, that you treat critical failures as failures and failures as successes and successes as critical success or something like that. But you're tying more to it than just getting a +2. And I think that's a whole area of the game that should be explored more. And I think it's something that, we could definitely kind of lean into. Dylan, that's possibly an option, right? To sort of, again, build in more sort of benefits to not just, it's more than just getting +2. One of my biggest complaints about some of the skill feats, let me pull up a skill feat that I have a particular problem with. I'm picking on this skill feat. Let me bring it up here. Here we go. All right. You're about to set out from North Point. Rumors have been spreading that the wild beasts of the Jagged Pine Forest have been increasing, both in the number of their attacks and the savagery of their attacks. Ancient, dire animals, unseen since humanity first returned to these perilous and wild and untamed lands, have now been seen prowling the forest. But never fear, for you have with you someone who is an expert in the ways and means of the forest. That's right. They have terrain expertise forest. And what does that mean they have? You guessed it. A +1 circumstance bonus to survival checks in the woods. Yes, nothing says expertise like a +1 fucking circumstance bonus to a check. This is the most sad trombone skill feat of like all time. Not only is it hyper specific, but nothing about this feat. It is mechanical only. It is soulless. It is boring. Even if the bonus was higher, which in Pathfinder 2 would be a big deal, it would still be soulless and boring. Nothing about this feat is cool. It doesn't give you any additional abilities. It is just flat and horrible and boring. So many skill feats fall into this category, and they are horrible and awful for it. Aid is greater than terrain expertise. That's true. You're like, hey, I'm trained in survival. I could just try to aid you. If I hit DC 20, you get the same amount of bonus. So it's just, it's one of those things where it's like, why not give me, and I'll counterpoint this by saying that in 5th edition, they also kind of screw it up. Because in 5th edition, someone like the Ranger who's really good at wilderness, they basically say, hey, you're trained in the wilderness. Guess what? The checks are automatic and you never have to worry about it. Well, that's also not fun. right? Like, I don't want it to just be, oh, I took this thing, so now it's completely hand waved. I want to interact with the game. Give me a way to interact with it. Damien says, as a rule, Pathfinder 2 needs a lot more interesting skills and general feats. There are 3 general feats worth taking if you don't get high perception. And he is completely correct. Incredible Initiative is one of them. What else is there? Let's see. If you're a cloth-based caster, taking armor proficiency light is actually pretty good too. I'm okay with skill feats. I just think it is a massively underutilized section. So, I think that, I think what they really need to do is, it's like fleet, incredible initiative, and I don't know. Like it's worthwhile taking up, or picking up, what's it called? Canny acumen until you have to retrain it later. Untrained improvisation can be really good as well. Yeah, Swing Ripper got it. That's it. Canny acumen. Yep. I don't know about toughness. Toughness is pretty weak, but it doesn't matter because your general feats are just horrible and boring anyways. I don't know why they made that part of the game so bad. So definitely one thing I think what needs to be completely redone is the whole skill feat component. and maybe the general feats too. I think that whole area is incredibly underutilized. I think it's incredibly, and you know why? I blame all of you. Because people are so obsessed in Pathfinder 2 with combat and 3 actions and move, stride, strike. I do 2 actions and I want to fight the thing and I want to fight the other thing. And what about my class feat? I don't get enough class feats. Let me get more class feats with free archetype. Free archetype is still cool because now I get to be 17 different classes and I don't have to make any real choices because I can take things from the fighter and the rogue and the sorcerer and the champion. And I like free archetype. But the fact of the matter is, that's the shit that sells, is the stuff that you get to use in your fight. And, the general feats that we just listed, things like incredible initiative, fleet, right? These are all toughness. These are all things that matter in a combat. It kind of defeats the purpose or the point. Even the skill feats that are considered to be very popular typically are because they have a combat potential. And that's because Pathfinder 2, not only is the system designed around fighting, but we, as a collective customer base, have made it about fighting. We've told Paizo we don't care about having sophisticated systems around skill. I mean, think about how many conditions exist that affect the nature and flow of combat. Frightened, stupefied, prone, flat-footed, enfeebled, clumsy, drained, stupefied, etc., 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 etc. And this is the game. And think about how many different ways there are to interact with those conditions outside of just hit point damage. Not to mention all of the spells that affect all those things. And that's because the game is saying, hey, this is what people wanted. Yes, Golarian is correct, right? The audience wants that. The audience wants characters that, or the customers want characters who are these combat behemoths with the numbers that are really high in the sky. And, it's a video game approach. I hate to say it. And, something like diplomacy is relegated to explain the investigator to me then. Dylan, if anything, I would say that the investigator, actually, in my opinion, is a horrible class. And I'll tell you why. Because if I was playing in a campaign that was all about mysteries and murder and discovering stuff, as a GM, I might ban the investigator. Because the investigator basically says, I'm not going to play your mystery game. I'm just going to pop a class ability and have that do it for me. So the investigator is actually good for the character or the player who doesn't actually want to investigate. They just want to roll a die, or they just want to like pop a class feature and have it just, do it kind of for them. Yeah, I kind of agree with that, Brutus, right? It's like, you know what? I'm bad at mysteries, and I don't really want to pay attention to the clues and try to figure this out. So I'm going to be an investigator, because that way I can attack the problem with character building instead of actually engaging in the mystery. Investigator class is kind of like diplomacy, the class skill. Now, this is true for 5th edition as much as it is for Pathfinder 2. But if you look at diplomacy, the class skill, think about how complex and nuanced a social interaction could be. But in Pathfinder 2, you meet someone, you make an impression, and if you raise their attitude to friendly or helpful, you can then make a request of them. It's one action. You set the DC. If you agree, if you make a success, the target agrees to your request, but they might demand additional provisions. If you get a critical success, they just do it without any further qualifications, right? That's it. Imagine if combat was treated the same way as diplomacy. Imagine if there was a skill on your character sheet called combat skill, and there was like a couple actions, and one was called like make an initiative check, and everybody makes an initiative check. It's like, hey, if you get a success on your make an initiative check, you can then make the win a combat action, and you make a check, and it's like, if you succeed, the monsters go down and everybody loses some hit points. If you get a critical success, the monsters go down and everybody's totally fine. If you fail the check, the monsters go down, but everybody's kind of beat up. Maybe some people are wounded. Maybe you have some conditions. And if you critically fail the check, somebody dies. If two or more people critically fail the check, it's a TPK. And that's it. You could take the diplomacy model and turn the game into a combat point. It's you could do it that way. Now, they don't do it that way. Why? Because people like to move the miniatures around. I own like over, 5,000 miniatures, okay? I have over $1,500 or something in Dwarven Forge. I like miniatures. I like moving stuff around. But, I don't want to play the game where I just go, But I'll tell you this. When we were playing our Legend of the Five Rings game, Legend of the Five Rings, similar to Pathfinder 2, has 3 modes of play. It has downtime. I think it's literally called downtime, where it's representing, in the movie sense, it represents montage, right? It could be hours, days, weeks, months, years even, but it represents a long passing of time. Ironically, in that game, if you have a long downtime, the GM can ask you what your character was doing and award you experience, because it's assuming that your samurai isn't just doing nothing. But the other style, the second mode of play, is what they call narrative scenes, which in Pathfinder 2 we would call exploration. This is everything that isn't a montage, but also isn't sort of time is, of the essence. We're sort of going round by round, turn by turn. We're not in a sort of turn-based order. So that's narrative time. And then the third type is what they call conflict. And in Pathfinder 2, this would be called an encounter, where there's sort of an initiative check. The thing is, in Legend of the Five Rings, there are several types of encounter with different mechanical rules. One of them is called the skirmish, where a small band of samurais, the PCs, fights a roughly equivalent size small band of foes, aka your normal fight. But there is also a conflict called the intrigue, which is a round-based, turn-based, just like a combat, but you're not fighting with swords, you're fighting with words. And the game has all these robust mechanical rules. There's special, they're almost like feats, but they're for social feats, that you can take that only work in that type of conflict. You can literally basically build a character who is really good at fighting with their words. Not like, and this isn't like Bone Mo or Scare to Death, where you're like, hey, I'm going to take my social skills and make them combat purposed, right? That's not what it is. This is for legitimate social interactions. Now, why does that game do that? Because that's important in that game. It's not important in Pathfinder 2. It's not important in D&D 5th edition. It's there to be like, let's get this over and done with. Okay, yeah. All right, you go to the merchant lord and you say, this is our situation, this is our problem. Make a diplomacy check. I'll aid him by telling him about how we really need this help, and I'll make a big deal about the church. Yeah, okay, cool. You make a check with religion to aid him. Okay, yeah, I got a 32. Great. What's your proficiency? Master? +3. All right, with circumstance bonus +3. I roll it. I got a 27. Great. His will DC was 25. You improve him from neutral to friendly. You can now make a request of him. Okay, so my request is, can you do X, Y, and Z for us? Make your check. You succeed. Okay, success means he'll do it, but with a cost. He agrees to help you, but if he sneaks you in to the evil king's castle, he wants you to steal the fabled scepter of Gaul. That's his price for helping you. And you guys go, okay, I guess we agree with that. Okay, great. And boom, there you go. In 5 minutes, you have resolved this social encounter. And, you could role play a little bit. You could fluffy bullshit time it a little bit, as we call it here, where, I'm seeing things in character, I'm describing things, but honestly, they don't really make a difference on the nature of the game. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to a die roll, just like everything else does in a game like D&D and Pathfinder 2. And boom, and we move on. We get to what the game considers to be the interesting parts, right? The parts where everybody gets to use their hundreds and hundreds of feats and powers and items and stuff like that. And that's usually typically an encounter that is combative in nature. And that's where the game has all of these rules that we all go over and look at all the time and we're trying to figure out. And all the combat type feats and reactions and the attacks of opportunity and the power attacks and the sudden charges and the fling ally and all that other stuff. And so Pathfinder 2 is showing you that, hey, this is where that game is. But the design, but the structure that they built in Pathfinder 2, I think could support a robust mechanical social encounter system. And the same way that you use class feats to sort of build out what your character can do in a combat, I think skill feats, well, for starters, full stop. For starters, I think it would be cool if your character essentially had 2 classes. This is not even a Pathfinder 2 thing. I think it would be cool if your character had, and I'm trying to, I don't have it around me, but I'm going to do a video on my what I call my con bug out bag, my convention bug out bag. I have like a little, it's like a small Under Armour duffel bag, but it's not like a big duffel bag. It's a small duffel bag where I just have a bunch of games that are quick and easy to pull out at a convention. Everybody, they're all one-shot driven. It's all just super driven. And one of these games is called Danger Patrol. And in Danger Patrol, there's a stack of your character is made up of 2 pieces. Okay, there's the left side of your character sheet and the right side of your character sheet, and the left side is all an adjective. Okay, Danger Patrol is like very much like a Indiana Jones or like a space Flash Gordon kind of pulpy sci-fi, zany 50s action. With laser pistols, pew pew, very cheesy sci-fi. But the left side of your character, and the idea is you just shuffle these up and you hand them out to your players at the table. The left side of your character sheet, which is from a pile, is all an adjective. Daring, adventurous, intrepid, brilliant. And the right side is a noun describing what your character is, like pilot, warrior, scientist. And so you mix them all up and you hand them out. And so someone might be the brilliant pilot or the intrepid warrior or the two-fisted adventurer, right? So you kind of mix these characters up. And the right side kind of tells you what you do, and the left side kind of tells you how you do it. So one of the ideas I have is like the idea that your class kind of really determines, it's really just about, in Pathfinder 2, and to be frank, in D&D as well, with the exception of maybe the investigator, it really shows you how your character functions in combat. There's very little about your character class that really shows or functions how it functions outside of combat. The exception being the rogue and the investigator, who get, you know, 1 million skill trainings and 1 million skill feats, clearly showing you that you get a benefit in that phase of the game. But I think it's interesting if you basically had sort of a non-combat class, you know, kind of like free archetype. But imagine if instead of having your class and then your free archetype, if you had like your class and you would get a class, you know, and it'd be more like your combat class. Like, what role does your character serve while they are in combat? And then in addition, you had a class that was like, what does your character do when it's not time to fight? What is your character good at when they are, you know, talking to people or exploring the ruins or making their way across the trackless wilderness? And if you kind of separate those two and really develop that pillar of the game more. People talk about the 3 pillars of fantasy role-playing game, right? Combat, exploration, and social interactions. And I think that those other 2 pillars, exploration and social, are both woefully underrepresented in both D&D 5th edition and Pathfinder 2nd edition. But I think that Pathfinder 2nd edition has the DNA, it has the mechanics for you to really make those things really interesting, and mechanically interesting in the same way that we appreciate the combat component of mechanical. Is it better to have a more hands-off approach to social encounters to allow each table to decide their style preference? I mean, if that's true for social encounters, why isn't that true for combat encounters? I mean, that's always kind of my purpose and my point to it. Me, Derek Melenda, I am not a great swordsman. I took a fencing class in college, and I was not very good. But the game has no problem with me playing a character who has a really high attack bonus. And I move my character around and I use my powers and my abilities that my fighter or my barbarian or whatever has, and I crush face and I wreck people. I think the same thing is true for social encounters. I think what we are distinguishing here, and this is why I always get into the distinction about what is the difference between role-playing and fluffy bullshit time. Fluffy bullshit time is mechanically, we know what's going on. A dice roll is being made, a number is being generated, it is being compared to a target number, or DC, and we are checking whether it is higher or lower, or in Pathfinder 2, 10 higher, 10 lower, or somewhere in between. That mechanic applies to everything in Pathfinder 2. Now, whether you want to add description to that and add flavor to that, add some sprinkles, some sauce on top, I mean, that's up to you and your table. But there's no reason or restriction or requirement that you do that for any part of the game, whether it's social, exploration, or even combat. It's easy enough for me just to simply say, I attack the person. I mean, most people aren't going to be so robotic and static that they are literally going to go like, stride, strike. Most people aren't going to go, make impression request. Like most, you know, maybe for being a troll and you really want to just be funny about it. Most people are going to put a little something into it, but the game doesn't care actually if you do or not. I mean, sure, your GM might give you a circumstance bonus, maybe if you had a really cool description, but technically they really aren't supposed to. I mean, they can. I mean, you can technically do whatever you want. You could also just say, wow, that was a really good description of your attack. You cut the guy's head clean off. He was at full hit points and he's just dead. You could do that as well. But most people don't, right? Most people make you attack until they're at 0. So all I'm saying is the DNA in the game system is there for you to build this component up. So if you really want that to be an important part of your game, I think that is an area of the game. Now, I understand why they didn't include that in Pathfinder 2, because that's not what their game's about. That's not what people care about. People don't want to socially interact. They want to kick ass and take names, and they want to be cool video game anime characters with really high armor classes and really tight attack rolls. And that's fine. That's fun. They want to move miniatures around in combat and flank people for the 900 millionth time and be like, they're flat-footed. Oh my God, AC -2. I get it. I like it too. I just like other things sometimes. And I think that is an area where we could take the game. And I don't know that Paizo will ever take the game that way, so maybe it relies on a third-party person to do the game. So I mean, and again, and I think Swing Ripper says this, and I apologize, I'm behind on the chat, but this is a really great point. I have no problem with people requiring folks to put a little bit more fictional elements into the game before they will allow a mechanical rules interaction to take place. Most commonly, this is true for people with social actions. So Swing Ripper here says, I persuade is simply not enough, but I persuade by bringing up my common history is enough. Great. Because they also apply that to their combats as well. I attack troll is not enough, but they do need to put some thought and description into their combat actions as well. That's great. I think that's fine. So Brutus says the main difference is that combat has very easy to identify points where to actually call for a roll, but social encounters are a little more fuzzy. I disagree in the context of Pathfinder 2. Pathfinder 2 is fairly well structured in this perspective. When you have any sort of social interaction, you need to know what the target's attitude is. Their attitude is hostile. Their attitude is unfriendly. Their attitude is neutral. Then you make an impression. Because, well, I mean, theoretically, you could just leave it at that. The only time that social interactions ever come in is if you try to make an impression and request something from them, which, to be clear, is kind of how most social encounters work. I want information from them. Okay, so you're asking them a question. You're asking them for something. You're requesting something from them. Okay, well, first, you need to get them to like you. That requires 1 minute, and you make a diplomacy check. And, I mean, that's it. It's very cut and dry, I think. Is it simple? Absolutely, it's very simple. It's a very stripped down procedure because the designers of Pathfinder 2 do not want the encounter with the merchant or the king or the chamberlain or the princess or the priestess or the wizard. They don't want that encounter to take an hour like it would in combat. They want it to just be over and done with. You know, say your spick. Say your spick, make a d20 roll, high enough, cool, we move on. And that is, I mean, that's the system that they designed. That's the system that if you look up, you know, the diplomacy skill in Pathfinder 2, that's what you get. All right, I'm trying to get caught up here. Social classes focused on role-playing like scientist for wizard or soldier for fighter champion. Well, Brovlith, that's the key, though. You could separate them. Like, what if you were a fighter scientist? You know, look at Indiana Jones is a great example of this, right? Two-fisted, whip-cracking, punching, you know, but he's an archaeologist, right? Like, that's what he does when he's not being a badass whip guy. He's an archaeologist. You know, history is replete with characters who have these non-combative roles. Pathfinder 2, well, I don't even want to say Pathfinder 2 because Pathfinder 2 is a grandchild, great-great-grandchild of a long lineage of very combat focused. And this was accidental, okay? It was accidental because the original game of Dungeons and Dragons didn't have rules for anything, let alone skills or anything like that. The only thing it had rules for was combat. And the only reason it had rules for combat was because it came from a war game. And that was the only thing that a war game had, which was rules for combat, because it was a freaking war game. So everything else in the game used to just be, I don't know, whatever the GM feels like. There was no rules for them all. And so we've added these rules in over the years, specifically really starting with 3rd edition, which became Pathfinder 1, which became 4th edition, which became 5th edition, and now we have Pathfinder 2. But all of this additional elements has always just sort of been an afterthought in the legacy of the D20 system. Now, there are other game systems, which I have talked about at length, which don't follow that legacy, right? Which said, hey, I do care about these elements. I do care about these types of encounters, and I would really like to do them. Going back earlier to my Legend of the Five Rings example, we were playing our Legend of the Five Rings game. Oh, it is thunderstorming. Okay. I was like, oh, that was very dramatic. We were playing our Legend of the Five Rings game, and we were really getting into making the skill checks between the characters and the interactions with them and the NPCs, and even within the party's interactions with each other, because in Legend of the Five Rings, each character might have different motivations. They might serve different masters, and they have different goals within the context of the game that you're playing. So they're I don't want to call it party conflict, but there's a little bit of party conflict. We were all really interested in that, and the skill checks were really interesting. The skirmish system that I talked about, basically your standard D&D, okay, there's the party of 3 or 4 or 5 samurai versus, 3 to 10 monsters, foes, villains, and then they fight, and it's round based. You get a turn, you get a turn, you get a turn. There's an initiative order. It takes about 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. That part was actually the most boring part to us. Not necessarily because it was bad, but just because we were like, that's kind of what we're not into this game. We were like, is there a way that we can actually just sort of represent these combats with like just a single die roll or just a couple of dice rolls? Because we wanted to like Pathfinder 2 diplomatize combat in that game, because that wasn't as interesting to us in that game. Combat was fairly infrequent, very deadly, and making the specific round by round by round by round by round tactical choices was not as interesting to us in that game as, was the Crane clan going to go to war with the Crab clan over the disputed territory? That was what was much more interesting to us. Hitoshi from the Mantis clan had clearly been placed here to bring shame to Doji Satsume, but who knew that he was actually Doji Satsume's illegitimate son? And why did they place him there? That was way more interesting to us than fighting. And so it was almost kind of like a drag because we wanted to get to the good stuff. Well, for most people in most campaigns, the good stuff is combat. And that's why the game system is built that way. But it doesn't have to be. That's all I'm trying to say. So when I think about what are the ways that I would like to see the Pathfinder 2 system expanded and explored, it's in that direction. I don't want more combat classes. I don't need more combat classes. I want to see what else the game system can do. Show me what else the game system can do. Let me use these cool rules and these cool systems to do other things. That, to me, I think is interesting. And I think the foundation of the game, the structure of the game, is extremely sound. And I'd like to play more with that. Let us see here. I know I've been going off on a chat here. Frost Raven. Derek, seriously, I would back a Kickstarter for social rules for Pathfinder. Create social points, conditions like confused, aroused, angry, and feats. Yes, exactly. We know what prone means, right? And in combat, it's not just, right, if combat in Pathfinder 2 was just like combat in basic D&D, right, where you literally the only action you have is move or strike. There's nothing else. And that's the way that combat was for a very, very long time. You never had moves or powers or feats or anything. Combat was literally just kind of like, it was like a craps game. Now, craps is really exciting for me because you got money on the line, right? You might have a $50 on the pass line. But it's fundamentally just rolling the dice and seeing what happens. You're not really making any decisions. Once you made your bet, you're just letting it ride and just waiting to see what happens. But, and that's the way combat was in those older games because it was so dangerous. And the bet, instead of $50 on the pass line, was your character's life, dead at 0 hit points and no coming back. And you were kind of just like, oh my God, is he going to live? Is he going to live? Is he going to live? So it was a very short, brutal affair. And before you could it was hard to get bored because number one, it was going to be over in about 5 or 10 minutes. And number two, there was a lot riding on it. So you were kind of noticeably like nervous and interested and excited. And obviously that's changed because our games are now less deadly. They take a lot longer. And that means in order to be interesting, we have to be able to make decisions. And so our games are far more than just beating each other with our weapons and watching hit points deplete. Pathfinder, now, taking a step back, I think some of the other game systems, ones that I love, like 3rd edition, didn't do this very particularly well. Pathfinder 2, I feel, even 4th edition, which I love, didn't particularly do this really well. Pathfinder 2nd edition is the first game that really kind of forces you to have to be a little bit more clever in the way that you approach combat. The character, the player, the party who can use their talents and their abilities, their class features and abilities, feats, magical items, etc., to gain a numerical advantage over their opponent by inflicting certain conditions, by increasing certain bonuses, by applying certain debuffs, by using spells and magical items to give themselves certain statistical advantages, is going to be successful most of the time. And the game really pushes you towards that. There was a lot of times in previous editions of the game, in third edition, you could trip somebody, you could grapple somebody, but the game, it was almost not worth it. It was kind of just like, kind of like how Disarmed feels. It's kind of like how a lot of that stuff felt in prior editions of the game. Pathfinder 2, for the first time, creates a really compelling case to actually go out of your way to use spells and to use martial-focused abilities to inflict things like these conditions, because it's going to allow other players to do things. And so, to Frostraven's point, things like Confused, Aroused, Angry, like Legend of the Five Rings has conditions that are exactly like you describe. They are social conditions that you can use to your advantage in social encounters. And that can be where the game is extremely, extremely powerful, impactful, I should say. Sorry. Question from Anthony: if we introduce social mechanics for PCs to influence NPCs, does that mean we let NPCs influence the PCs with the same mechanics? I say yes. For starters, I think they either intended this to be the case, or they thought about it and then they decided not to go with it, okay? Because there are feats in the game. I'm bringing one up right now. There are feats in the game, like, for example, let me bring up this one here, okay? This is Haughty Obstinacy. It is a human feat because, you're a human and you've got a big attitude and, you don't take crap from anybody, right? So you're kind of an obstinate human. Well, look at this feat. Your powerful ego makes it harder for others to order you around. If you roll a success against a saving throw against a mental effect that attempts to directly control your actions, you critically succeed instead. And okay, that's a baseline. We understand that as players, if someone casts a dominate spell on me or a charm spell on me or a suggestion spell on me, that's a magical effect that sort of overrides my character or me ability to play my character. But look at this. Look at this second line. If a character rolls a failure, if a creature rolls a failure on a check to coerce you using intimidation, it gets a critical failure instead. So therefore, it cannot try to coerce you again for a week. Well, if you read in the back of the book the description on the coerce check, it says it doesn't work on PCs. So why would they have this haughty obstinacy feat in the game? And it has that line in there. Now, again, I don't know if this is like a vestigial component of playtesting that made its way through the game, but I could promise you, playing like that is a lot scarier. Because again, we accept that it's a lot of the people out there, and I'm pointing fingers at all of you who think or claim that they are such good role players. It's an interesting comparison, because you will say things like, I think that's horrible. I think a GM should never control my actions. But you have no problem if a monster demoralizes your character and then your character becomes frightened too. And you could say, okay, but then you're frightened too. And you're like, so I get a -2 penalty to my skill check. But are you forced to be frightened? No, like your character could literally get demoralized, become frightened too. Let's say a frightful presence comes down and your character's frightened. Mechanically, they are frightened, but there's no compunction given on you. You're allowed to just charge in against the creature that just frightened you. The game doesn't make any sort of restriction against that. And so you could argue that you're doing what is frightened then? Why is it even called frightened? It might as well be called debuff penalty 1 or debuff penalty 2, because it's clearly not making you frightened. But then everybody's fine with this when it's magical, though. Like, if your character gets charmed or dominated, they're like, oh, well, it's magical. I guess I have to play my character a certain way. But the idea that a character, through skills, can't also influence your character is a little strange to me. And again, the DNA is in the game. Feats like haughty obstinacy. There's a couple other ones, too, where it makes specific mentions about people trying to influence you, request you, coerce you, and so it's in that's actual game text, it's weird because you're like, why would that be in the game if, according to the rules of the game, and when you read, by the way, when you read coerce, it says nothing about not being able to be used against PCs. The only place that, if you look, I think it's like, it might be in the appendix or the index, but there's like a section at the end of the description about attitudes, and it goes like, note, PCs can never have their attitudes or influences changed by coerce or make impression checks or request checks. It's almost like this afterthought that was added into the game. It's really funny. Like, it would be very easy if you never played any role-playing game ever before and you picked up Pathfinder 2. It'd be really interesting, like a cabin in the woods with a bunch of wild people who had never had any experience with role-playing games, and they played Pathfinder 2. If they missed this like small section or segment, they might never have realized that was actually a part of the game, and they might play the game and it'd be like, this whole different set of experiences, because they'd be like, oh man, like, as players, not as PCs, like people around the table be like, hey, Danielle, I don't know if we should go back to the city because, the last time we were there, that really charismatic and influential noble, the one who's gathering power with the local merchants, man, he just made such an impression on our characters. And boy, I don't know, it might be silly for us to try to outwit him again. That guy's just so damn charismatic. He's just so damn powerful. I think that's kind of an interesting idea, right? Like a legitimate Littlefinger as a bad guy who can legitimately influence you. Because like, no matter, you can have a guy or a girl on your character, like in your campaign, who has like a 48 charisma and a 965 diplomacy, and is capable of just, it has just this aura, this cult of personality about them, and is the most influential person in the world. But somehow, as your character, you're just completely immune to their charms. They have no even if they make the most compelling, awesome, incredible speech to you, you can just be like, no, I don't like him. And that's why GMs feel compelled to just beat you into unconsciousness and death, because no matter how you feel about your level of consciousness, when you're at 0, you're unconscious and dying. And apparently that's the only way that you can, there's almost like this, it's almost like a vicious cycle, right? The only way to mechanically influence a character is through violence. It's the only way that a GM can force the world onto your PC, because it's the only thing that the mechanics support. Again, reiterating that point that this is a game that's supposed to be about fighty time, the way it is currently developed. But the DNA, the design is there. You can see it in feats like haughty obstinacy. I raise my apathy to block your left-handed compliment. Exactly, Abuelo. I know I'm a little bit behind, but that's a really good point. There is in Legend of the Five Rings, decorum is everything, right? You need to seem like you're very polite. Because if you're a very rude person, even if you're talking to someone who is a real grade A asshole, you're still supposed to show courtesy and respect. There's a whole feat in that game that basically allows you to insult people, but it's done very backhandedly, right? It's like a backhanded compliment. So it doesn't seem like you're being a rude asshole and being a dick when you're insulting this person. And that way you can kind of you don't lose any social cred with anybody else in the room, but the person who's hearing the insult understands that it's an insult, but no one else does. So you don't look like you're like being a dick. Golda Cat says, I've honestly found the VP and influence subsystems really, really robust and intuitive for whipping up tactical social encounters. That's great. That's cool. Yeah. That's definitely step one, right? That's definitely step one. I also don't mind what K Swisstack is saying. Different XP tracks for different things. In fact, let me show you something. All right, hopefully this will focus. So here's our Legend of the Five Rings role-playing book. And if we come here to the back, where the kind of the foes are, okay, you can see here. Let me see if this will focus. All right, sorry. Come on. It's too bright, isn't it? There we go. Okay. So if you see the Bog Hag, it says right underneath it, the conflict rank. And the first number is its, like, basically it's like its level or its CR or its, you know, challenge rating or whatever. But every monster or every foe has two of these. The number next to the sort of the war banner is its sort of combat challenge rating, which is 8. And then the number next to the fan is this creature's sort of social combat rank. So the creatures themselves have two different CRs, basically, because some creatures are, you know, more combative of a threat and less of a social threat, and other characters are the opposite of that, right? To use a Game of Thrones example, a Littlefinger type character might be a level 15 social encounter, but he might only be like a level 3 combat encounter, right? He's just not even a threat physically. So very cool. Everybody's saying that they can't see it. Well, damn it. I need to make sure I have the glare. But anyways, so point is, in a Legend of the Five Rings, you have different levels, so maybe you could have different things as well. So that's definitely something I think I would change as well. And I think you could make the game a little bit more robust. Honestly, what I would love to see do is have an extremely, now we're talking real next level stuff, have an extremely basic system where you have a class, a core chassis that has almost nothing built into it. And then you have different components, like a different class, that you can plug into the character. We all very familiar with free archetype, okay? So think like free archetype or like dual class, but think of it like in a very modular way. Imagine a character in Pathfinder 2 who didn't have a class. It's a little weird, right? Like they didn't have a character class. But you could have, there's 3 pillars to the game, right? We have the combat pillar, we have the social pillar, and we have the exploration pillar. What if your character, what if there were clearly defined mechanical ways that you could add these things to your character class? But what if they were all optional? What if you had a campaign that was only about exploration and social? And when you plug, so your character would only have an exploration class and a social class. They wouldn't even have a combat class. Combat in your game would be handled the way that diplomacy is handled in the core Pathfinder 2 game. Just a quick roll. Okay? And that way, if your game was all about exploration, now you have this whole exploration class. What is your character, like we understand what a fighter does or what a wizard does in combat, but what does a fighter do or a wizard do when you're exploring? Well, what if you had an entire robust mechanical system that was completely modular? If you didn't care about having a really detailed, gritty, exploration-based game where, you know, you're kind of really digging into sort of the going through the dungeon or the wilderness, you just wouldn't use that. You would just use the default rules, right? Though you'd play the way that most people play Pathfinder 2 or D&D. You just hand wave that shit, you just move ahead, and you get back to the really good stuff, the fight, because that's what people are really interested in. But if you made it modular, you could have people insert different components as they see fit. And then when they create a new book, instead of being a bunch of new classes that you can't actually use because you can only play one class at a time, unless you're playing free archetype, you could instead just say, oh, here is a whole new pillar, a whole new system for supporting that pillar, and you could just plug it in into your existing game or into your new campaign, and, proceed in that respect. And again, you could see elements of this, right? Like, I'm not making this up, because, like, think of it like hazards are kind of like the monsters of exploration phase, right? Haunts, to a certain extent, are kind of, they're kind of complex ones, have initiatives, so they kind of work in the encounter phase. But I'm just trying to think, like, in the terms of what we already know and experience in the form of the game. And the other thing too is, and I don't think this is what Frost Raven is saying, about choosing what to prioritize: combat, skills, etc., etc. I think part of the problem with this, and historically this has always been sort of the approach, right, which is like, choose to be good here, but then you give up something else here. I don't think I think that's a flawed approach. We're all here to play the game. Your time is just as valuable as my time. We should all get to participate in the fight. We should all get to participate in the exploration. We should all get to participate in the social encounter. It shouldn't just be like the rogue, the trickster rogue or whatever with the good charisma. They'll do all that. I'll just sit back and be on my phone. And part of the reason that they do that is because they know that the way that the game system is set up right now is that supposed to be like a lickety split and done. But if you've ever been in one of those campaigns, or you've ever been in one of those sessions, and I'm sure you have, where those social encounters still involved some dice rolls, they still involved some diplomacy checks or sense motive checks or whatever, but you're playing the low charisma fighter, or low charisma barbarian, or low charisma wizard, low charisma, whatever. And you're basically just like, this should have just taken 5 minutes, because the game basically said, hey, these things don't matter, just take care of it. But you're like, oh, we're playing this out and it's 20 minutes. And I'm not doing anything. I don't really even need to be here. Why is this even a thing? If you're going to have something in the game, everyone should get to participate. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is easy or that you can pull it out. Brutus says, technically all RPGs are modular. I mean, yes. I mean, I guess in a sense, technically all games are modular. You can pull out whatever games, whatever rules you don't like. But I think that's a fallacy in the game system. I think that just because you can change any rule doesn't mean you should. I could change the rules of chess because I think rooks are too powerful, but doesn't mean I should. Yeah, exactly, Nathan. Because part of the problem is you build someone who's for combat focused and you build someone else who's for social focused, and then suddenly when you're in a combat encounter, the other character is not really doing anything, and vice versa. So I say avoid that. Maybe just give everybody a chance to do something. Like, there's very few examples in movies where a character is so one-dimensional that they are just a combat monster, right? Every character has an element to their character that would be good in different components and phases of the game. If you look at like someone like the Avengers, right? They all have a great and unique set of skills that they can use not just when they're fighting, but when they're doing something else as well. And I think that's really important to do. One of the reasons I love the proficiency scaling off level in Pathfinder 2E is because it opens the door to anyone doing anything. That's interesting that you say that, because in my experience, the DCs in Pathfinder 2 are too high, and that the only people who have a really good chance of being able to do anything are kind of people who are specialized in that thing. Someone who is a master or legend with a high stat and a good item bonus. So Hulk is a scholar, right? Like, that's literally, he's got 2 classes. He literally changes modes, and then in the final movie, he's both. He's high level now. He gets to just be both. Which is really fun. And again, I think that's, again, it's a role playing game. I wanted to be, it's cool to be able to do all these different things and to explore everything else and not have the game just be about fighting. Because there's not a whole lot. I mean, there's some feats that I think are kind of boring in Pathfinder 2 that should be fixed or improved or whatever like that. In the class feats, I mean. I think a lot of the classes shouldn't even exist, to be honest with you. I would love to just see like 4, if I rebuilt the game without thinking about this modular thing, but I would only have like 3 or something classes, right? Like there would be like the combat focused class, there would be like the skill focused class, there would be the magic focused class. Those were the 3 classes. And everything else in the game would basically essentially be an archetype or a module that you would plug into that core class. And sort of influence and change it in that way. That's how I would design the game. I don't think you need all of these unique classes all the time. And I think we've seen with the popularity of free archetype that concept is very, very appealing to people because it's exciting to not be so locked into such a rigid structure, which the game has, fundamentally been defined by since it was first created in 1974. Bro left. DCs in Pathfinder 2 are set so people with the highest possible bonuses would fail when he rolls a 9. What about people who don't have the highest possible bonus? Right. And not only that, like, once you get to the point where you go, well, I need a 15 to succeed, it's like, okay, yeah, you're going to have a good chance of failing, but you also have a good chance of critically failing. And critically failing can be very penalizing and painful in Pathfinder 2. And so the game sort of double disincentivizes you to trying things that you aren't good at. And again, I think it does this on purpose. I don't necessarily agree with that game decision, because it's one thing to say, okay, I wasted my time or I wasted my action because the DC was 15 or I needed a 15 to succeed. But it's another thing to say, not only did I waste my time, not only did I not achieve a positive outcome, I also actively made the situation worse. Like, I'll give you a great example. I've talked about the aid action a lot. In fact, one of the only house rules I'm using for my new game is I'm eliminating the roll to aid in combat. It still takes an action on your turn. It still takes a reaction on the other player's turn, but it is a static bonus. It is automatic. If you are trained, it's +1. If you're expert, +2. If you're master, +3. And if you're legend, +4. But we're playing Quest for the Flame, no one will ever become a legend. But the idea, I am sorry, but the idea that we are playing this collaborative role-playing game experience and that I could try to aid your character and critically fail. So it's bad enough that I could just fail and I don't achieve anything and I wasted my action and I wasted my reaction and you didn't get any help from me. The idea that I could critically fail and give you a penalty disgusts me. It disgusts me. It's right up there with critically failing a recall knowledge check and critically failing, and it's a secret roll, so you wouldn't even know that. And by trying to help your party by using something that your character is presumably fairly good at and hurting them, not just you accomplish nothing. That's bad enough. Hey, we wanted you to help. You weren't able to help. That's kind of a letdown. We were looking forward to it. But the idea that you would harm them, the idea that you would harm them is absurd. And even if it's it's realistic for this reason, I don't care. It's not a good game mechanic. It's just not a good game mechanic. Brutus, the world doesn't always have to be at level for the party. That is true. If you are playing a very open world, the party can do and go anywhere you want to. If you are playing any sort of Pathfinder 2 adventure or adventure path, as many people are, most people are, whenever I've done surveys on my YouTube page, a lot of people are playing APs. Paizo does not agree with you. Yes, if the level 14 party wants to go break into some random baker's house in Absalom, the DC for the lock might only be 15 or 20, and they will pass it even on a nat 1. But in the adventures that you are in, everything typically most of the time, like 90+% of the time, is elevated to, you know, your level. I think rolling for aid would be okay. If you roll higher, they could substitute your roll, but then it would be a fortune effect, and you could just hero point lol. I mean, that's not bad. That basically is like functionally giving them advantage, which is basically what the help action does in 5th edition. Just instinctively, I think Dungeon World has rolling for aid too, and I scrapped that nonsense instantly. Yes, I think I said this. I think I said this on our most recent podcast, where which just released, I think Sunday. And the second half of the podcast, it's a long one. It's like 3.5 hours long. We talked about Dungeon World, and I said the rolling to help or interfere with the bond system is horrible. It's garbage. You should throw it away. It is horrible. It is terrible. So Gold to Cat, your instincts, you and me, we're on the same page. It's very good. Link says, I'm with Frostraven. Do an overhaul of skills and skill feats for PF2 into a beautiful Kickstarter for us to back it up. Your subs would love to buy something made by you and that you truly believe in. Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a lot of fun. I mean, I'll be honest with you. No Nat launched his Kickstarter today. Very cool. Very happy for him. We've never actually talked in person. We've only exchanged messages on YouTube comments. But he, you know, he has heart in it, and the guy works super hard. As someone who does this, not for a living, obviously, but the idea, the amount of stuff that he comes out with, the content, you know, I kid him and I rib him and I shit on him a little bit here with things like Smash or Pass, you know, for the monsters. I do think that's silly, stupid. I get it. He's playing the algorithm game. He's got 20K subs. I don't even have 5, right? Like, so he's clearly winning the YouTube game for me, which is great for him. And he, you know, enough so that he was able to, it's my understanding, he's full time. He does this full time, which is incredible. That's really awesome and great. But he did his Kickstarter today, and you know, for me, it was like a mix of, I don't even want to say jealousy or envy, because that's not the right emotion. It was like a transitive fear. You know, role-playing games they're not just my hobby. They have basically defined my life for over 30 years. And, you know, most of my friendships are based around this and have been based around this for almost my entire life. And the idea of creating something and putting it out there as sort of your legacy is so, like, overwhelming. It's almost difficult to comprehend. So I really do give him a lot of respect. And I hate to say this. I watched a lot of NoNet videos. Certainly before I started my own YouTube channel, but more so now that I have my own YouTube channel. I will say that I think it's my understanding that he is a relatively new, in my mind, a relatively newcomer to the RPG scene. I don't think he played, you know, I don't even think he's that old. So I don't think he's been playing for, you know, 10 years or, you know, something like that. I think he's only been playing for 4 or 5 years. And that actually might be an advantage, honestly, to be honest with you. Because the game, it's a fun, cool thing that you're really passionate and you're into. It's not this like all-encompassing, all-consuming component of your life. Because again, I mean, realistically, if I did a Kickstarter and did really poorly, that would be the end of me. So that being said, Link, one of my goals with Knights of the Last Call, we have a Patreon, which has been incredibly successful. In fact, I will toot my own horn. To my knowledge, we are the largest, predominantly Pathfinder 2 focused Patreon in existence. We have 150 members. That's more than NoNat. That's more than Rules Lawyer. That's more than How It's Played. Now, all of these channels have more subscribers than us. Rules and Lawyer and I are about the same. But we have the most patrons. And again, to my knowledge, we are the largest Pathfinder 2 based Patreon in the world, which is pretty sweet. And one of the things that we want to do, we have a crazy Patreon environment, a lot of people here are from the Patreon, so they know this. We fight, we bicker, we argue, but it's more like a family, I feel. Like, I mean, obviously, like, some people, I think, maybe don't see it that way, but for me, it's more like a family that's arguing rather than like random internet trolls just fighting and yelling at each other. But the talent that has been gathered there has just been incredible, blown me away. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years now of combined GM experience in that Patreon. And one of the things that I want to do is, I know that there are some other content creators, mostly for 5th edition, who produce a monthly publication, a PDF, an e-zine of information, ideas, content for 5th edition. And I think it'd be cool to do something for like that for Pathfinder 2. I don't want to get involved with Pathfinder Infinite and all that jazz. I'd rather just create something that I can deliver and give to my patrons. And if people want to sign up for the Patreon to get that benefit, maybe they could. So I like to walk before I run, or crawl before I walk before I run. And so I think before we would ever do anything like a Kickstarter, we would stretch our wings. We'd learn how to fly by using, for what is for me, the single greatest gaming resource that I know of, which is my own Patreon. And not because I'm on it, but because everybody else is on it. And a lot of those people are, they're smarter than me. And they have just as good, if not better, ideas than me. So I've just sort of organized everybody into one kind of crazy chamber. And so I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring that. And we'll see how that does. And I don't know. I mean, I definitely have some interesting ideas about role-playing games that aren't necessarily shared by the vast majority of people. But we're doing something right because, 40 or 50 of you, some odd people, are still here. So cheers. All right. I'm not Storm Phoenix's real dad. High and family, low and furious. Yes. The infamous Fast and Furious system. Oh yeah, Anthony. Steven has been really awesome. He's a member of our Patreon, actually. He was actually in here at the beginning of the channel, or at the beginning of the thing. So I'm sure he would really be awesome resource for that. Nathan, if you're interested in joining the Discord, there should be a link in the description below. Otherwise, it's patreon.com/Knights of Last Call. And our Discord is a part of our Patreon benefit. It's not an open Discord. That was a decision I made earlier a while ago, and I hate to say it, but it works. Even charging $3, which is our lowest level, all that $3 gets you access to the Discord. For $5, you become a knight, and you get basically access to all of the behind-the-scenes footage, the bonus contents, the Northern Reaches mega game. $5, in my mind, is like if you want the whole enchilada. $3 is more of a trial period if you just want to conversate and have fun. I understand $3. Not everybody has $3 to spend on a Patreon. That's totally understandable and respectful. But that being said, by even charging a small amount of money, and I would give this advice to anybody, if you have a hobby or a passion and you are thinking about getting into social media, YouTube, TikTok, whatever, and you want to create a Discord, think twice before you make it open to the wider public. Because when people have no skin in the game, it means they don't need to respect you. They don't need to respect the community. They don't need to respect what you're trying to do. Even a couple of dollars a month, that pay barrier is such a strong disincentive to keep trolls and people who just want to shit on you and people who don't take you seriously. It keeps them out. And then people who are embracing your message and want to actually be part of a community will be allowed in. And it is a decision that I 100% support. Just make a false public Discord without moderation to test how it would go. Exactly. I'm a member of some public discords, and it's just a mess, and I don't want to be a part of it. Kendall asks, for stealing cool abilities and stuff, which 4E book do you recommend? It depends what you're trying to steal. I agree with what Brutus says. If you want to look into some really fun, cool ideas for monsters, I would definitely check out the monster manuals. Monster Manual 1, 2, 3 are all pretty good. Monster Vault is also pretty good. They're very, 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 very interesting in terms of giving creatures abilities that allow them to fulfill their role, which is something else. In fact, that's something else that I would also change about Pathfinder 2 as well. I think 4th edition had a really, really good idea in sort of defining what a monster's job is. And there's elements of I love the Pathfinder 2 monsters. They're way more interesting to me than most of the 5th edition monsters. But I would definitely encourage the monster design to be more tightly focused around what a creature's job or role is in a combat. That is not an opinion that is shared by everybody, even within my own Discord. There are some people who disagree with me, but I really like the idea of monsters having a class, not like in a PC way, but like monsters having a role. And not just having stats. That's the key thing. To be clear, Brutus is also, by the way, true about that. Adventurer's Vault is also really good. Adventurer Vault 1 and 2 are both very, very good. But if you go into like something like PF2 tools and you use the monster builder, you'll see that like Pathfinder 2 has like different options like Magical Striker, Brute, Soldier. But all that does is change the stats. All that's doing is changing, like, does the creature have high AC or moderate AC, high hit points and low hit points? Stats are important, but like we learned from terrain expertise, stats are also really the most boring component of the dish. What you really want are monsters that have abilities, things that the players can see and interact with and chew on that make that monster feel like it is there to do its job. And those I think are really important. Those are really critical because that's going to stand out way more to a player when the days and when the hours turn into the days and the days turn into months and years and they look back at the really cool encounters, they are not going to remember that creature had, oh man, that creature had a really high attack roll and really high reflex save. Like the game requires that we have these things, but I promise you they are not what is exciting. Yeah, monster rolls from 4th edition are really awesome. Stats are the tortilla, but what's in the taco? I like it. Galarian is right. Without, without the tortilla, there's now that it falls apart, right? But you need the filling, and the filling is what really makes the taco. That's a really great metaphor. I like that. Manuel says, that's why I like some of the monsters in the Abomination Vault's AP. I also like the Abomination Vault's AP. There were these tanky undead that bolster their allies and also weird wisp with low health but can confuse your PCs. Yeah, I'm not trying to say like every monster in Pathfinder 2 is like some sort of failure or something. I'm just saying like it's interesting to me when a monster can not only is it useful for the players because the party understands, being very selfish here, it's also useful for you as the GM. One of the biggest problems I have, we've all been there, right? You're running a game, you're running it out of an adventure, or maybe you're pulling it out of the seat of your pants. You're running the monster out of the book or out of the bestiary or off of Archives of Nethys, or you've got it pulled up in Foundry. I don't know. This creature has abilities and spells and I don't know what it's supposed to do. Like, what is this? The monster needs to come with like an instruction manual. I don't have time to sit there with every single monster and go through the entire class, all the powers and the features and abilities of this stupid monster, all of its random different abilities. Okay, it's got high regeneration, but it doesn't seem like it can attack well. Like, what am I supposed to be doing with this monster? It's not my favorite book, but I think, okay, let me put it this way. I think it's overrated. It's a good book, but yeah, I have both of those. I have both volumes of I'm trying to look at the title of it. The Monsters Know What They're Doing by Keith Ammon for 5th edition. That's way too much. It's like a whole novel written about all these monsters. We don't need all that. But like a monster, every monster should have like this is the monster's role, what it does in combat. Here's like 3 bullet points. You know, the foe is going to try to close the combat as quickly as possible, do that one power, and then retreat and use its ranged attack. Like, I don't know, something like that, right? Like, just give me a real quick, give me a cheat sheet, give me the summary. Like, let me know what this thing does so I don't have to be sitting there trying to decode what the hell this monster does in the middle of a session. Yeah, that's right, Dylan. The DNA, again, we this is just like we were talking about earlier. Pathfinder 2, I will criticize Pathfinder 2 through and through. And in all honesty, having an entire Discord built around Pathfinder 2, I would give the Pathfinder 2 game system like a B-. I really would. I would give it a B-. But that's like the final version. But the design, the architecture of the game is a solid A. And I love that. There are things that they did with that architecture that I don't love, that I think could be better. And that's for me. That's not for you. I will admit that through and through and through and through. I think a lot of the design decisions for Pathfinder 2 were made to specifically appeal to the combat-focused, character-building type player and or the video game type player who wants to level up their character, get higher level, get the more power, get the more magical items so they can take on the ever-increasing foe. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is how they chose to use the backbone of the system and what they delivered to us. And I think the game system could be used for much, much more than that. That's not the direction that they chose to go. That's fine because it appeals to who it appeals to. By the way, 5th edition basically just has a backbone. It really doesn't have anything else on top of it. It's pretty much a bare chassis. And that's why when people talk about how it's quote unquote easy to house rule and easy to modify 5th edition, that's actually true. To Galarian's point, 5th edition it's just an empty taco shell, right? It's just an empty taco shell. By itself, not very appealing. But it does easier if you want to add whatever you want to add. But that is something that you have to build yourself, or you have to go buy a third-party book, or you have to go do something else. Okay? And there are some people who have never had Mexican food, and so when you just give them an empty tortilla shell, they go, this is really delicious. I've only ever had white bread my whole life. There's a weird chewy texture thing going on in here. I really like this. And then people like me, they come in and they go, look, I know you're really liking that taco, but it's not really a taco. That's just a tortilla. You're supposed to fill it with meat, and you're supposed to maybe put some cheese or some beans or some sort of, and then people go, you're gatekeeping. Don't tell me how to enjoy my tortilla, my taco. And I'm like, I get that you're enjoying this tortilla, but my God, you should really try doing something else with it, because that really is a much better way to approach the game. Whereas Pathfinder 2 is a fully developed taco with a meat filling. And the meat filling is combat and encounters and going through an adventure path. What I'm saying is the DNA could support a variety of games. You could scrape that meat out and make it a veggie taco with beans and vegetables, and that's like your social game. Or you could have the meat taco and then sprinkle in some salsa and some sour cream and some cheese and make like a real big taco supreme, and that would be like this super mega duper ultimate version of Pathfinder 2 with all these different modules that we were talking about earlier. All right. I'm sorry, I'm trying to catch up with what people are saying. Dylan, I also agree. When I make monsters in Pathfinder 2, I actually give them that tag. It also makes it really easy, because that's the other thing. By putting it into the book, you're 100% right, Dylan. I need a monster that's really good at attacking from ranged. There's no easy way in Pathfinder 2 for me just to go find an archer or an artillery type monster. You just have to know what every single monster does, or you have to read through every single monster description to go find a creature that's good at attacking from a distance. There's nothing in the monster description or ability that would ever let you find that in an index. That is an excellent, excellent point. Props to you. Kudos to you. Let's see here. So you're saying we're close to TTRPG greatness, but we're just shy with social encounters. I think we're shy with all of the structures of the game except for combat, to be completely honest with you. Okay, yeah, Anthony's saying it's not just social encounters that are the problems. Good, Anthony. You're learning so well. I think Nightish is correct that we are close to TTRPG greatness. If you want a very mechanically robust game. Let's be clear about that. If you don't want a mechanically robust game, then run away from Pathfinder 2. Whether it's the current version or just the chassis in general, run away, and run away quickly, because this is a game for mechanics. If you're playing Pathfinder 2 and you're ignoring mechanics, you are ice skating uphill. I would recommend that you go somewhere else. Can you play it that way? Yes, you can play it that way. But I really stress this. I'm not trying to say this in an elitist, gatekeeping way. Maybe you're playing Pathfinder 2 because you really like the lore. Maybe you're playing Pathfinder 2 because you really like the art. There's a million reasons. One of the things I always talk about, I've been a role-playing game player for a long time. I've been a Magic the Gathering player for a long time. And one of the things that they focus on is player profiles. Why do people enjoy Magic the Gathering, and what are the ways in which they enjoy it? And for some people, it's only just the game itself, the mechanics, the interaction. The cards could be blank, and they could have no names, and it could just be 3 damage. That's all it has to say. For other people, it's a much more evocative experience. They care about the art. They care about the flavor. So there are many different ways to enjoy games. Very much agree with that. That being said, Pathfinder 2 is a complex game, and I think you're actually doing more work to ignore the complexity than you would be to embrace it. And so I would definitely, there are tons of games out there that are very, very simple. If you want to play a game where you're just free rolling, just kind of going with what flows and goes right, not only is there just, indie games like Dungeon World and stuff like that, but you could just go play Basic or Old School Essentials, which is the recent retro clone of basic D&D, and you'll get your basic D&D experience with very, very, very little limited rules. Anyways, or 5th edition. Redirectory. I also think a lot of PF2 design was trying to be different than 5e. They do a lot of things that I like better than 5e, but they also do a lot of things that I like less than 5e. Yes, I do think that this was a deliberate attempt to not be 5th edition. I think Mark even recently said that there were some things that they were thinking about doing for Pathfinder 2nd edition, but then 5th edition did them first, and they said, damn it, well, we can't really do that in 5th, like fortune rolls exist in Pathfinder 2, right? True Strike is essentially advantage, but you notice how they don't really use that a whole lot in the game, because I think they didn't want to get clumped in by being like, oh, it's just advantage. Which is a shame, because advantage is a great mechanic. Not only because it's a great mechanic, like mathematically and functionally, it's a fun mechanic. It's an intuitive mechanic. It's a mechanic that feels good in your hand. It feels good at the table. It's visual. It's tactile. I normally get to roll 1 die. Now I get to roll 2 dice. Oh, see how that 1 die was a nat 1, but the other die is a 15? Advantage is freaking awesome. Because if you had given me a plus 10 bonus, I still would have rolled that nat 1 and I still would have failed. But because of advantage, it feels different. It feels like you have more agency over the dice roll. Even though it's all random, choice matters and people overvalue choice. And so advantage psychologically is a very rewarding mechanic. Total entropy. Question, if PF2 is a B minus, what would 5E be? Like a C, honestly. It depends on what you're trying to do with the game. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Maybe a C plus, actually. I've heard it breaks down, though. I've only played 5th edition above level 10 once, and it was that game I was showing earlier in the stream where I had multiple 30s and ability scores, and we like completely destroyed it and rebuilt it and made our own whole set of rules. We had more complicated rules that were in like our house rule documents than were actually on your character sheet. So I have no idea what high level 5th edition is like. But fundamentally, it's hard for it to be bad. Pathfinder 2 can go bad. It can go bad. 5th edition, it's kind of hard for it to go bad or for it to go good, right? Because it's so neutral. And that can be a very powerful thing, especially if you're playing with new people or especially if you're playing with only partially interested people. Pathfinder 2 asks a lot of its participant. It asks for you to care. It asks for you to invest into the system. There was a YouTube series. There is it's like TED Talks, but it's for game design, and GD something like that. It's some sort of conference series, and this game designer was on there talking about fun in video games, and should fun be given or should fun have to be earned? And they were using the example of video games where, like through quick time events and kind of AI type things, you don't actually have to be good at the game for your character in the game to be a badass, right? Like think about like Street Fighter 2 and Mortal Kombat. If you want your character to be able to do this really cool move, you, the player, have to invest time to get your timing down, to learn the move, to do the Hadouken, to do the Shuriken, to do the get over here from Scorpion or whatever. You actually have to put time into the game. If you don't know what you're doing, your character is just going to be like, huh, 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 and lose a lot. But then by putting time and effort into the game, when you do get good at the game, you make it feel way more rewarding. Whereas a game that just uses push triangle to do a powerful attack and like the game kind of just does it for you, or some sort of quick time event so that it looks like your character is doing all these really cool, crazy moves, but all you, the player, are doing is pushing square at the right time, pushing triangle at the right time. Those type of games can be very, very good at lower barrier of entry, getting people into the game. They're going to say, look, I came in here to enjoy myself. I don't want to die 25,000 times just so I can have some sort of artificially inflated ego because I beat some game. Like, I don't fucking care. It's a video game. That's how some people, that's maybe how a lot of people feel about role-playing games. They don't want to invest any time. They don't want to invest any effort or learning or figuring out what is something. They just want to play it. They just want to have fun. They want to push the button and it does something well, That's 5th edition. That's really good at that. You don't have to be good at 5th edition. I mean, there's some character ops that can go for it, but in Pathfinder 2, if you make a bad character, it's going to be rough. And there's a lot of things, we spend a lot of time on this channel, a lot of time, I have a whole series about combat and tactics, which hopefully we're bringing back because people are like, we want more. Give us more in-depth, people are studying Pathfinder 2 combat tactics like they're going to war, like they're going to fight in the Ukraine or something, right? Like it's crazy. They it's like small unit tactics. They're sitting there like, I got a book about the assault on Breakcourt Manor so that I can prep for our next Pathfinder 2 session. Now, like for some people, that is really awesome. And that's how they get rewarded from these games, is by studying it and learning its ins and outs. But for other people, that is not appealing. So, what game is an A then? To answer that question. I think no game that is an A in my mind is a generic universal game. Every game that I know of that achieves an A rating does so by being hyper focused on this one thing. And so it's like an A with an asterisk, because it's not always the case that this game is going to be for everyone. It's not always the case that it's going to be an A. You can't just apply it to any game system. I think this game system probably isn't an A. It's probably like an A minus, so it's probably good. Could be a B plus, depending on how you want to look at it. But I think it's probably like a B plus, A minus, in my opinion, at being a samurai game, at being a Fantasy Asia Bushido game. It does this very well. If you wanted to use this game to do some dungeon crawling, this game would fail utterly. Let's see here. Sorry, lots of comments. You guys are real chatty tonight. I want to say thank you for everybody for being so chatty. Gatekeeping is so overused. I agree. I think Derek will spend his whole life looking for an A. I mean, Anthony's correct. This is my holy grail. It's why I always get so frustrated and burned out with games. It's crazy. Blueberry. Well, hey, Blueberry. Ever since I've tried out Old School Essential and BX Box, 5e has clicked for me and become infinitely more fun to play. They really need to organize things a bit better and demonstrate gameplay. I agree. The reason I started this whole thing off with a bit of stuff about me and thinking about 5th edition. For me, going forward, I think for me to enjoy 5th edition, it's really just about me saying, I don't even really care what the rules are, and just ignoring them and playing it like it's BX D&D. And if I ever play 5th edition again, I will not use feats. I probably won't use skills. It'll basically be basic D&D, but with a couple of class abilities and features, some of the mechanics like advantage and stuff like that. But I probably would use ability score improvements, but I would get rid of feats, which are already technically optional. I would get rid of skills entirely, more than likely, and I would just play it like basic D&D plus. I would play it as a very like a modern reskin of basic D&D. That's how I would play 5th edition going forward. I have no desire to try to turn 5th edition into a more complex game. I have no desire to try to turn 5th edition into a tactically rewarding, deep, mechanical game. To me, that's not what basic D&D is about, and I think that's not really what 5th edition should be used for, and I don't even think it's particularly good at doing that. So, if I ever get to a point where, like, if I wanted to play a game that was Theater of the Mind, could you play a Theater of the Mind game in Pathfinder 2? Yeah, but I don't know that it would be worth it. And I think you'd be leaving a lot on the floor. I mean, obviously people are going to say, "Oh, Jason Bullman did it." I mean, but it's very hard for me to look, for you to look me straight in the face and explain to me something like Long Strider spell or the Fleet Feet in a game that is Theater of the Mind, right? A plus 5 foot speed advantage. These little edges and things are what Pathfinder 2 is all about. Playing on a grid is what Pathfinder 2 is all about. That's not always the game that I want to play. And so if I were to play it, now to be clear, the problem with 5th edition D&D is if I wanted to play that type of game, I'd probably play Dungeon World. So, in my instance, it's very difficult for me to imagine a scenario where I'm going to pull it off of the shelf. But the new edition is coming in a couple years, and my God, we'll see what they come up with next. Let's see here. If you don't want mechanics, then maybe you don't like Mexican food. No taco for you. Well, that's, I think, for me, the taco shell is that, getting back to this idea, the taco shell metaphor is this D20, 6 stats, DC based system, D20 plus a bonus tied to one of your stats, and you're trying to reach a DC, whether that's an AC or it's a skill DC, it's some sort of numerical target number. That's the tortilla. That's the tortilla. And that's basically what 5th edition is. There's very little else to it. I mean, even in the core game, feats are optional. Pathfinder adds a lot to it. But there are other foods than just the tortilla, right? You could also have pasta dishes. You could also have rice-based dishes. You could also have bread, well, some things are closer to tortilla. Maybe you could have a naan-based dish. So there are other role-playing games that aren't D20 based that don't use that same structure, but still get you to a delicious meal. And there's a lot of people who are just stuck in the mindset of it has to be a taco. It doesn't have to be a taco. Maybe it's not that you don't like food. Maybe you just don't like Mexican food. Maybe you need to go try some Thai, or maybe you need to go try some Italian. So that's all. That's all I'm trying to say. I like stupid metaphors, and that's a really particularly good one. PF2 isn't that hard. The only thing I struggle with is condition management, like in 4E. Yes. I mean, at this point, I've been doing it for so long. I've kind of gotten used to it, but it is a problem for sure. Total entropy, I also agree with that point. Again, monsters should be designed and put into these books the way that GMs rule. This is a big complaint of mine. 4th edition got sent through the ringer through this, but these books to me are technical manuals. I am using them in the field. I am using them when I am out on a job, when I am out on a call. That's me running the game. These things need to be designed so that I, the end user, can look stuff up and find stuff at a moment's notice. They are not indexed well. They are not designed well. In fact, the 5th edition, the back couple pages of, I'm not even kidding about this. The back couple of pages of my 5th edition player's handbook are ripped because I got so mad at the index when you look up something and it takes more lines of text to say, see skill check, than it would be just to give me the page number. This index that references the index, I think it only does it once, but it does it many times, but I don't think it ever does. I don't think it ever does a double reference. But man, I one time I was playing it and I just got so mad at the game. I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It was literally a spontaneous moment of anger. I just ripped the book. I was so mad. So yes, these designers and editors have gotten way too comfortable with these books being these are works of art meant to be enjoyed and savored. It's I need something if it was up to me, maybe fine, whatever. Give me your monster manual. That's beautiful and on the book. I would rather have something that was spiral bound that can lay flat. Every monster is a 2-page spread, right? On the left side, you have this information. On the right side, you have this information. Something that I could use at the table, that nothing ever goes over onto an opposite page. If I'm running a monster out of the bestiary and the monster starts on this page and I have to flip the page to the next page to get more of the monster's descriptions, that is an F. I don't care how cool the monster is. That is an F. That's just not acceptable. Everything needs to live on a spread. And like I said, I'd prefer it to be spiral bound and laying flat. Better yet, have it so that a family of monsters is on 2 pages. And that way, if I need to, I can close it and I can just have one page open. Anyways, they really need to improve the usability. So they definitely need environmental tags and things like that. Let's see. Brothless says they made a lot of stuff only to abandon it and let players homebrew it themselves, like talismans. Brovlev, I agree with you. There's a lot of cool stuff that they introduced into the game. Spell hearts, talismans, tattoos. I'm sure I'm thinking of 100 other things, but I just can't come to my mind right now. And they just abandoned them. Let's see. Luigi says bonuses and penalties don't make for moments. Advantage, disadvantage, and active reactive benefits create moments that draw attention. I completely agree with you, Luigi. You said it better than I could have said it myself. Very, very cool. And I agree with you that physical component, that creating that moment is very important to me. I think it's important to the game. I think we lose some more of that as we move towards virtual tabletops, to be clear. But one of the things I really like about Advantage is, again, that physicality of it being very present. It's not just something that is ephemeral, like a bonus. It's something tangible. Like, I don't have to tell you the bonus. I can give you physically the bonus in the form of a die. And I think that's really cool. Okay, Swiss Deck, that is it. GDC. Game Design Conference, I guess, but you are correct. It's GDC that I was talking about earlier about should fun be given to players or should fun have to be earned by players. So let's take a look here. People talking about stuff that got ignored. That's great. Brutus, I also agree with you. Talismans was a big swing and a miss, almost on every component. There's very few that are interesting, and then the ones that are interesting, there's very few that are actually powerful. And of the few that are powerful and interesting, they usually have such strict requirements to use them that the people who would be most interested in using them can't use them. Gets an F from me. Yeah. I don't know what else to say. I don't know what else to say about that. And they need to do those better. Again, something I would love to see developed either by us at Knights of Last Call or by the Knights of Last Call community, that we can put into a product that we can, give out and sell to people, or somebody else, who's even more creative and smarter and better than me. If they want to do them, I'll happily pay them money. But same thing with Spell Hearts as well. Yeah, don't get me started on the tattoo maker. That's a whole crazy thing. And letting the players ignore the requirements normally, I mean, that's fine. The game is whatever you make it. In the case of Talismans, I think it's particularly broken. But it's just we are making the commitment to playing a game that is very mechanically complex because we want those mechanical complexities to matter. And I'm not trying to say like I feel locked in, like I can't change a rule. Of course I could change a rule. I change rules all the time. If you watch my last campaign, you know that I completely changed around hit point rules. I completely changed around the hero point rules. And I did so very carefully, but I also feel like that I really messed up the game a lot in certain ways. And not always in ways that I expected to mess it up. So the more complex the game is, the more those unseen or unforeseen circumstances can really drive you up. Talismans, consumables in Pathfinder 2, it's a whole separate issue. They talked about this a little bit at the end of the Roll for Combat thing a while ago, where they talked about the price of consumables. Oh, no, it was Arcane. Maybe it was Arcane Mark. Either way, it was Mark Stiefter, and he was talking about that. The problem with consumables is that they are overpriced for the level that you would get them at. Pathfinder 2 uses an exponential treasure system. And so buying consumables that would actually be useful is cost prohibitive. Thus, you are essentially forced into buying consumables which are less powerful than you, which makes it so that they're not as useful because by definition, they aren't as powerful. It's a very weird catch-22 and an area where I think, again, I give the structure of Pathfinder 2 an A-, but I give the implementation of it like a B-, because how they chose to implement that, I think, was done very poorly. I think consumables could have been a lot cooler because they, in my opinion, they designed consumables at the same time thinking that they were going to have resonance in the game, right? And, we know that by the time you see a playtest document, whether it's for, the Thaumaturge or the Scion, like the final product is going to look pretty close to that. Like they'll change some things, but it's very rare that they're going to just completely redesign things. So my guess is they had internally built this whole system around consumables and all this other stuff and you could make consumables really powerful if you are using resonance. But then at the last minute, they do the Pathfinder test. They've got to go to print in 6 months. And the playtest results are everybody hates resonance. And now they have this entire system that is structured and built around powerful consumables and resonance. And now you've got to take resonance out of the game. And how are we going to balance this? We can't do another round of public play testing. So the only thing that we can do, we got to be safe, is we got to just nerf it into the ground, And that's what they did. And that's why I think consumables are the way that they are. So there we go. Let's see here. I think PF2E does cinematic stories and heists really well because of the mechanics. I love me some emergent gameplay, though, which has led to system shopping. Yeah, I'll agree with that. In fact, I would say that PF2E, that's an area that I don't think it does particularly well. Oh, what are you saying, Dirk? You can't do emergent storytelling in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Yeah, kind of, sort of, because it is a complex game, and I'm fairly well skilled in this game, but it's hard. I'm not gonna lie. Like, if the party, if we're doing an adventure in the city and the party goes, Derek, we want to leave the city and head up into the nearby mountains and see if there's anything up there. It's like, that's kind of hard for someone to pull out at the last moment's notice. A simpler game, like a game like Blades in the Dark, where nothing has stats, no monster stats exist in that game. You could go with the flow a lot easier because there's nothing for you to have to look up. There's nothing for you to try to get right. Whereas a game like Pathfinder 2, prep is kind of needed, and to a certain extent, because it's a complex game. Either that, or you're going to be sitting around waiting for the GM to find stats, and then we get to that problem too, where you pull out a monster and you're like, I have no idea what this monster does. I have no idea how this monster works. I hope I play this monster well. I completely forgot. Oh, turns out it had an ability that when it dies, it's supposed to blow up. Didn't even know that. Forgot it. It was one minor line of text as a reaction somewhere randomly in the monster's huge stat block, and I missed it. By the way, happened to me on Rise of the Runelords. The party, in the penultimate episode of the Rise of the Runelords, they fought a frost worm in their climb up the Hook Mountain. And they fought it, and they killed it, and it died, and that was the end of the fight. It's supposed to explode into like a curtain of freezing blood or something. I just missed that it had some random death throw reaction on its monster character sheet in Pathfinder 2. And you're like, well, who cares? It doesn't make a big difference. I get that. But also it's like the game, I'm playing this game. It has all this text. I bought this thing with all this information for a reason, and they're just going to ignore it. It's just, and then for me to forget it, it feels a bit silly, right? Brothless says, about implementation, I think Magus is the peak issue of it. The amount of spells, recharge of Spell Strike, only 4 spells, Spell Strike provoking attack of opportunities, Arcane's Cascade being just, and he put a dash there, but I'm assuming he's saying Arcane Cascade sucks. I played a Magus for exactly one session. My Arcane Cascade was horrible. Yes, the Magus is definitely an instance where it suffers pretty badly from that. Brutus says, the idea was that the sell price is so low for at-level items, you are incentivized to use them, and then you can freely give level -3 items, and it won't break the economy. Maybe. But it's like, these level -3 items also don't really seem to do a whole lot, so I'm not really super interested in them either. So cool, I get them, but it also doesn't either. I wonder if they made consumables more expensive to help the alchemist shine more. No, if anything, I think that if the consumables were more powerful, the alchemist would be better, because then the consumables that he was making would actually be kind of cool and powerful. Let's see. Improfit says, playing an alchemist for a few sessions really helped me understand how things about the game by forcing me to count how many attacks you actually make in a combat session or a game. Interesting. I bet you do, because you basically are tracking how many bombs you have. Running 5e, I would sit down with no prep and improv everything based off of player action. I want to do that in PF2 and don't know if I can, honestly. Dylan, I don't know that I can either. I also don't know that I would want to. That's not what Pathfinder 2e is about. In my opinion. That's not what it's about. If you're just going to ignore all that stuff that makes Pathfinder 2nd Edition, then why are you playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Question, are you feeling a bit unwell or allergies? Allergies. It is allergies. I don't always get allergies. It's weird. Some seasons I get it. Some seasons I don't. But I am pretty stuffed up right now. But either way, I'm probably going to be wrapping up here. I went a lot later than I thought it was. It is super easy in rules light system like Dungeon World, Dylan. I agree. Swing Ripper's right. Yeah. Yes, I suppose, but there's a difference between making something that is good and making something that works. That's all I'll say to what Swing Ripper just said there. There's a difference between making something good and making something that works. But Swing Ripper might be a god amongst men and is capable of doing much that us lesser individuals cannot do. So that is going to be that. I want to say thanks to everybody for hanging out with me tonight. I'm going to be back Thursday with some spells reviewing, which is always fun. If you like this conversation, you want to be a part of this conversation 24/7, I encourage you to check out our Patreon. We have 4 different levels. Our Squire level, if you just want to dip your toe in. But if you really want to dig into the meat of it, I recommend you check out our Knight, Champion, and Hero tiers. They're going to get you all the action and some sweet fringe benefits as well if you go up the tiers. But it's a very active Discord, lots of conversations. If people have one complaint, it's that there's so many conversations going on that they want to be a part of. And if they get busy with life or work for a couple hours, they come back, 200, 300 messages. So it's a very active Discord for sure. And you really need to be on your game if you want to get the most benefit for it. But I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my evening. Thanks to everyone and anyone who tipped. And thanks to everybody here who participated, asked questions, joined in the conversations. Respect everyone for being such awesome individuals. We have such a positive outlook in our community, even here on YouTube. And I know so many of you are already members of the Patreon, so thank you for that. And if you are an adventurer and you're watching this now or you're watching this later, thank you for being so extra and paying for the upgrade, just so that you can have cool mammoth emojis. And remember, next week, Tuesday, we are going to be doing our Session 0 for Quest of the Frozen Flame. We're going to have some new players joining the campaign, and it's going to be a true Session 0. We're going to be talking character ideas, talking shop, talking about ideas, about what we want to make for the characters, building the party, composition-wise, mechanically making sure people complimented. It's not just role-playing stuff. It's going to be, small unit tactics type stuff that you would expect. But also with some considerations about who they want these characters to be. But of course, we're not going to get into super deep backgrounds because that's what the campaign is for, to play to find out. So thank you everybody for joining me tonight, and I will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace.